That is a biblical purpose for fasting. Number 4, fasting can be used as a corporate call. Someone just asked me not many hours ago, is it wrong for my pastor to call the church to a fast? It seems to me that my pastor is overstepping his boundaries. Well, I shared with that person, you're wrong. One of the biblical purposes and patterns for fasting and prayer is delegated to spiritual leaders. Spiritual leaders have a biblical pattern and a biblical authority to call the church or to call for what is oftentimes called a corporate or a communal fast. Let's go back in our Bibles to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles and the 20th chapter and verses 3 and 4. 2 Chronicles chapter 20 verses 3 and 4. Jehoshaphat was terrified by this news and begged the Lord for guidance. He also ordered everyone in Judah to begin fasting. He also ordered everyone in Judah to begin fasting. So people from all the towns of Judah came to Jerusalem to seek the Lord's help. That is an example in the Bible of a proper spiritual leader calling people for specific purpose to fast and to pray. Now, it might be added to that within the context of wisdom that you can't expect everybody in the church or in a corporate fast to enter into the same type of fast. Again, I've mentioned types of people who should not fast. And so you cannot place that guilt or that responsibility or that asking upon them. That would be unwise. And so it is biblical for a spiritual leader to call for a communal or a corporate or a church fast. But it is not biblical to ask everybody to do it the same way or even for the same length of time. You can suggest that, but just as God did not command fasting, a spiritual leader, a godly spiritual leader, does not command or demand or dictate the terms of fasting. And so if you have a spiritual leader in your life that's dictating and demanding and commanding fasting, then you know you've made a poor choice in spiritual leaders, because a godly man or a godly woman will never take it to that extreme. Number 5, fasting as an act of repentance. Fasting as an act of repentance. 1 Samuel chapter 7. First Samuel chapter 7, verses 5 and 6. Then Samuel told them, gather all of Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered at Mizpah, and in a great ceremony drew water from a well and poured it out before the Lord. They also went without food all day and confessed they had sinned against the Lord. Fasting can be set aside for the purpose of repentance and returning to God. Number 6, fasting to humble your heart before God. Fasting biblically is not only shown as a purpose for repentance, it is also shown as a purpose for humility. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 21. 1 Kings chapter 21, go down to verses 27 through 29. But when Ahab heard this message, he tore his clothing, dressed in burlap, and fasted. He even slept in burlap and went about in deep mourning. Then another message from the Lord came to Elijah, "Do you see how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has done this, I will not do what I had promised during his lifetime. It will happen to his sons. I will destroy his dynasty." And so when we study Ahab in the Bible, he was a wicked man and had a wicked wife, Jezebel, and failed God and rebelled against God. But he set aside fasting and prayer to humble himself before God. He realized in some way his error, and he bowed before and recognized God. And in his fasting and prayer, God reversed the timing of his promised judgment and said, instead of this promised judgment coming upon Ahab, because of fasting and prayer and contrition and humility, I'm going to postpone it. I'm still going to keep my promise. I'm going to wipe out his dynasty, but I'm not going to do it in his lifetime. That judgment will be delayed until after his death and be carried out upon his sons. And so again, another biblical purpose for fasting and prayer is humility. Number 7, fasting for the work of God. Did you know that it is biblically a pattern for people to have a heart for God's work, not for themselves, not for their job, not for their gain, not for their goals, but to love God so much that they also love His house and they love His work. And they fast and pray for the health and the establishment of the work of God. Where do we find that? We find that in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 3 and 4.